peoples. Even seemingly healthy young and old persons have died because of this notorious disease. There are multiple reasons that make COVID-19 is a dreaded disease, like the huge burden on health facilities, non-availability of the hospital beds, difficulty in assessing treatments for other illnesses, and disastrous impact on the economy. पूरे वर्ल्ड की जो आप देख रहे हैं कि किस प्रकार से लोगों को अंदर आर्थिक हालत खराब हो चुकी है और इसका बर्डन प्रिविलेंस पूरे के पूरे पॉपुलेशन के ऊपर पड़ता चले जा रहा है जब तक कि हमारे पास वैक्सीन डेवलप नहीं हो पाती है या एक कोई स्पेसिफिक ट्रीटमेंट नहीं आ पाता है। मैं ऑर्गेनाइजिंग कमेटी को बहुत बहुत बधाइयां देता हूं कि इस पर्टिकुलर टाइम के ऊपर इंडियन मेडिकल एसोसिएशन, राजस्थान स्टेट ब्रांच को भी और जो माइलेन कंपनी है उन्होंने भी ये बहुत ही टाइमली इस वेबिनार की जा रही है और जिसके अंदर जो एक्सपर्ट्स हैं वो एक्सपर्ट्स इस प्रकार के हैं जो कि रोज क्लिनिकल प्रैक्टिस इसी की कर रहे हैं, चाहे वह डिजीज के लिए हो या व्यक्ति के स्ट्रेस के अंदर काम आते हो। यहाँ पर डॉक्टर राघव शाह हैं, ही इज particularly the psychiatrist. He did MD from the SMS Medical College and DM at PGI Chandigarh, and he is particularly जो स्ट्रेस मैनेजमेंट कोविड के अंदर है उसके अंदर ये बहुत बड़ा काम कर रहे हैं। माय बेस्ट विशेष आप सभी लोगों को जो इसके अंदर पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं और मैं अब यह अपना आगे का काम करने के लिए आगे की चीज आगे बढ़ाने के लिए मैं हैंड ओवर करता हूं डॉक्टर राघव शाह को कि वो मॉडरेटर होके इस सब काम को आगे बढ़ाएं। डॉक्टर राघव शाह, एक बार फिर आप सभी को बहुत बहुत अभिनंदन, शुभकामनाएं। जय हिंद, जय भारत, जय IMA।
Thank you very much. You have given a very appropriate welcome note to us, which has exemplified your leadership skills in addition to your entrepreneurial and skills as a doctor. So I would now like to ask our current president of Indian Medical Association Rajasthan, Dr. M.N. Thareja sir. He again needs no introduction, but for all of us, I would just like to say that he is one of the authorities in sexual medicine in India. He has established his own center in Alwar, which has attracted patients, and he has benefited a lot of people from far and wide. He is well known in IMA circles as well as medical fraternity all over India. And to be specific, he is also the president of International Association of Sexual Medicine and Vice Chairperson, Council of Sex Education Parenthood International, and Vice President of National Association of Sexology in India. And in addition, he is the Treasurer of Indian Andropause Society, and Best Andrology and Male Infertility Practitioner Award for 2016 was bestowed on him. So we are happy to have you, sir. And I request you to kindly give an introductory note to this webinar of ours. Over to you, sir. Kindly unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Raghav Shahji, for your nice introduction. First of all, I am thankful to the Medical Learning Hub who has done this type of the nice webinar. This is the first and the best. There are so many webinars that already happened in this Rajasthan, but I think the most specialized webinar of this time, we are with us, Dr. Virendra Singh ji. He is the most learned member of pulmonologists. He is the one who start the inhaler therapy of asthma in Rajasthan when no one is using the inhaler therapy. So he is the best possible pulmonologist in Rajasthan. On the other hand, Dr. Raghav Shah is the first DM in psychiatry in Rajasthan. He's a very sound psychiatrist. He has done his DM from PGI and is the best possible. Nowadays in COVID area, there is much more problem of suicide tendency and counseling. He has got an expert opinion, and Dr. Shitu Singh is also very competent for his as a pulmonologist. And also thank to the participants who are joined this and take the guidance from this learned speaker. Thank you in the last to the Medical Learning Hub and Milan Pharmaceutical. Thanks.
Thank you for your introductory note, and it has created further interest and curiosity going into our webinar. As I can see, Dr. V.K. Jain sir is yet to join us. Is he with us?
He will join in sometime. We are
Okay.
contacting him.
So, till then, I guess we can move ahead with our technical and the clinical aspects of our webinar. So now I come to introduction of Dr. Virendra Singh. Very difficult to describe him in a very few words, but still I'll try to attempt some introduction for him. So he is a MD in medicine, but he is one of the pioneers in the field of pulmonary medicine. He is well known, as Dr. S. Agarwal had said, not just in India, but all over the world. He is currently the director of Asthma Bhavan and president of Rajasthan Hospital in Jaipur. He retired as the medical superintendent of SMS Medical College and Hospital, which is one of the biggest medical colleges in India and very prestigious. Under his guidance, a lot of academic work has been done. Difficult to enumerate all that here, but you can just understand that if you search him on Google Scholar or PubMed, it will be a host of articles which come through. And he is currently actively involved in the COVID management, not just in Rajasthan Hospital, but all over the state, as Sir had said that he's a member of the COVID task force. So I would request Sir to share his vast clinical experience as well as the theoretical knowledge for the benefit of our participants in this webinar. I hand over to you, Sir.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Raghav, for your nice words. Dear friends, this is the time when this webinar we are conducting, India is at the top level of both morbidity and mortality. Rather, we are just about to cross 1 lakh of patients per day, which is again the record. And this time, throughout the world, India is at the top level in new cases as well as the deaths data. At the outset, I am very thankful to Dr. S.S. Agarwal and Dr. Thareja for keeping this webinar, which is need of power for the learned doctors of the state. My task today is just to highlight some of the important factors which are important in clinical spectrum of the COVID. Today, every doctor is COVID expert, need to be, because we don't have beds in the hospital. So at home, we must at least train ourselves to do something early recognition and early treatment. Early recognition can save many lives, and early recognition of complication can save the crippling disease of the lung, which is taking a shape of ILD, and that is again very important. So my talk will be brief, but to give some message. So friends, when to suspect a COVID patient? If we come in contact with a COVID patient, usually we get contract infection, and mean time of incubation period is 4 to 5 days, but maximal is 14 days. However, 98% contract infection within 11 days. So if 11 days had passed and you were in contact of a COVID patient, probably you are not going to get infection from him. Another aspect of this webinar is that the biggest fraternity, biggest section who are sacrificing their lives is doctors and medical staff. It was in the news that almost 2,000 medical professionals who are government servants contracted infection, and the death was almost 13, and all were related to medical professional. So that is the state of affair. It is very important, rather it is a matter of paramount significance that we should treat our patient, but we should save ourselves as well. Now how? So incubation period is there, but how to recognize? Usual pattern is on first day a patient gets fever or chills, cough starts second day, but by third day usually in most of the cases fever disappears. Shortness of breath or difficulty in breathing is usually day 7. Fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, and new loss of taste, agnosia or anosmia, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, GIT symptom, nausea, vomiting or diarrhea. So there may be one or other symptoms during the illness that can happen. And if we have this knowledge, probably anybody in this period coming with fever, if we say that get your test done for COVID-19 RT-PCR, then there is 50% chance that he will turn out to be positive. So every fever case, we must suspect that it is COVID. Now, there are 4 types of usual presentation. More than half of the patients are asymptomatic. And second most common manifestation is respiratory. Third is musculoskeletal, and fourth is GIT. And at one of the time, initial stages of lockdown, when everybody was kept in hospital and every contact was tested for RT-PCR, then asymptomatics were as high as 80%. The second group is respiratory, and respiratory is one of the most dreaded because of the complications of pneumonia-like complications affecting both the lungs. Musculoskeletal, usually a patient gets body aches. That is most important. So that is next common. And few patients also complaints of diarrhea, vomiting and nauseating feeling, and that is GIT. So these are 4 common manifestations and patterns of COVID disease prevailing in our country at the moment. And these symptoms a person during course of the disease may get at different times. In hospitalized patient, usually it is again not very common, it is not uncommon to find delayed complication, delayed presentation of fever and respiratory failure. We have seen in our RHL COVID hospital, couple of the patient who at the time of admission were okay, but after 6 or 7 days they deteriorated. They developed high-grade fever and respiratory failure. Non-hospitalized fever patients, usually common symptoms are fatigue, headache, muscle ache. So sore throat and nasal congestion, even rhinorrhea are also prominent symptom, and anosmia appears to be most specific for COVID-19. In a, if analogy, I am given opportunity to extrapolate analogy, then this is a pataka. So we can see that the COVID symptoms are just igniting the fire. So gradually and slowly fire picks up this thread and then there is a blast. So normally in body, these COVID symptoms are there, but if there are comorbid conditions and elderly, then it can blast and kill the patient. That is a sort of analogy. And if and whenever we get COVID report positive, the first and foremost question which comes in our mind is whether my disease will be mild or it will turn out to be serious. The simple thing, if we get couple of the tests done, then probably we can know. And among these tests to tell is CBC. If lymphopenia is there, eosinopenia is there, or neutrophilia is there, yes, that patient may have more severe disease. High CRP, LDH, serum ferritin, and FDP are important markers of ongoing inflammation and cytokine release syndrome. FDP and D dimer elevation indicate that there may be a probability of thrombotic type of complication, and in such scenario usually low molecular weight heparin or heparin is administered in hospitalized patients. D-dimer with lymphopenia probably indicates critical illness. Procalcitonin with elevated procalcitonin, we can differentiate bacterial from the viral illness, but in COVID also, first week procalcitonin is normal, but in second week this differentiating feature is lost. IL-6 is again a marker of severe inflammation, and if it is high, then a couple of the medication can be advised to the patient. HRCT done at the end of first week is quite sensitive in picking up many infection which appears innocuous initially. Grade of severity of COVID are suggested. Mild to moderate indicates mild symptoms to mild pneumonia. Means less than 50% of lungs are involved. Severe means dyspnea, hypoxia, and more than 50% involvement. These patients are almost 14%. And critical, when respiratory failure, shock, and modes are present, it is almost 5% only. The course of the disease, as I said, first day usually fever and nose, cough, then patient feels better. And by the end of fifth week, he may develop dyspnea. And many usual complications occur from 5 to 10 days. But some patient may not develop dyspnea at the end of 5 days. So I call this period 3 to 7 honeymoon period. And many patient develop this sort of impression that their disease is cured. But the time of respiratory failure is at the end of first week and 7 to 10 days. And such patients sometimes may get complication of respiratory failure. Medical attention, if has not been drawn, then fatality may occur. So, however, one good thing is that now everybody is having oximeter. Even public is having oximeter. They are measuring it. At least COVID can be complemented that everybody is aware about respiratory failure, and in long run, not on in post-COVID era also, it will be very useful. Now question is, who may die? Statistics in Indian statistics shows if age is more than 80% and there is COVID illness, then 15% may die. 70 to 80, it is just half of that, that is 8%. 60 to 70, it is 4%. And uh, in addition to age, if comorbid conditions like hypertension, coronary artery disease, diabetes, CKD, and cancer are there, there is possibility that patient may have severe disease. Interestingly, very interestingly and curiously, respiratory disease patients, usually TB patient, may have more COVID disease, but asthma and COPD are probably only very few patients are affected. It is interesting and to be investigated in future research. A word about RT-PCR. Suppose I am having symptoms, and with these occurrence of symptoms, RT-PCR is most important confirmatory test. Problem with RT-PCR is method of sampling, because there is big fear psychosis, and that fear psychosis affects even medical professionals also. So the person who collects sample is most important person. If he takes only mouth sample, oropharyngeal sample, then the accuracy of RT-PCR is only 40%. If he collects sample from nose and mouth, the accuracy is 70%. And then there is viral replication. It is said that CT number is there. So it is once there is some RT-PCR done, then usually multiplication of RNA takes place. And after how many cycles of multiplication of RNA, the machine detects virus is important. If viral load is heavy, then earlier machine detects the load. If viral load is low, then machine has to exert more. It may be 35, 40. It does mean viral load is low. And sometimes it is only 18 or 19. It does mean viral load is high. One most dreaded complication of COVID disease is hypercoagulability. And it leads to increased risk of venous and arterial thrombosis of large and small vessels. And the predictors of hypercoagulability are mild thrombocytopenia, increased D-dimer level, increased fibrin degradation product, prolonged prothrombin time, and elevated D-dimer level have been strongly associated with greater risk of death. Deep venous thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, microvascular thrombosis of toes, clotting of catheter, myocardial infarction and injury with ST segment elevation and trochlear elevation and large vessel stroke. So these are embolic complications which we come across during the COVID disease. What is the management? Friends, you will agree with me that it is placebo pandemic. Rightly, Dr. Rajiv Gupta has said and published article in New England Journal. All sort of placebo in name of energy boosters and energy drinks and energy sachet. Then there are vitamins, and then there are large number of medicines which are claimed to cure the disease, but none has evidence. We are all using empiric therapy, none has evidence. So no yes and no for, but there are supportive therapy. How can we save lives? Number one, early detection of disease and then manage associated complications. Like if hypoxia is there, oxygen can save lives. If hypotension is there, our therapy can prevent hypotension. Arrhythmia can be cured. Electrolyte disturbances can be corrected. Hyperglycemia is notorious in these patients. At our RHL COVID center, also we have found out that hyperglycemia is quite common. On one hand, COVID increases hyperglycemia. On the other hand, steroid which is used in cytokine release syndrome also causes hyperglycemia. Hydroxychloroquine though came out as a wonder drug, but it still needs lot of evidence. But my personal experience is that in musculoskeletal disease, it is sometimes it is good. Remdesivir, when inflammation is there, when CT chest shows some disease, and tocilizumab, when apart from cytokine storm, we also have increased high level of IL-6. Then these are used with. Friends, I will not take much time, but I have felt that uh, not only as a doctor, but as a patient also, I felt the disease. And then for that, I wrote a poem which I'll recite. It has happened. Couple of months back, there was a news that somebody committed suicide in Rajasthan Health University complex. Then subsequently, yet another patient was there. So what sort of psychological stress I used to wonder. But when I had, then I realized that it is a great stress. And I am happy that Dr. Raghav is there. He is managing all the patients of our COVID hospital, RHL COVID hospital. Every patient is given counseling, and that is vital part of therapy of a COVID patient. So I will recite my poem that is in Hindi. And friends, it is कोरोना ने जीना सिखाया, बुरा ने महसूस करना सिखाया. 3 महीने पहले पत्नी सरिता और दोस्तों ने कहा, रोगी देखना बंद करो, अपने को बचाओ, 67 साल की उम्र हो गई. लेकिन इस कोरोना युद्ध में सैनिक का धर्म निभाने का एहसास था. कैसे बंद कर देता पेशेंट देखना. जब सैनिक का काम करेंगे तो चोट तो लगेगी ही. और मैं हो गया कोरोना पॉजिटिव. मेनी टाइम्स इट इज सेड दैट भाई आपने ये लापरवाही की, वो लापरवाही की, इसलिए आप पॉजिटिव हो गए. मेनी टाइम्स आई हैव सीन ऑथोरिटीज आल्सो. But when you will enter in a fierce battle, तो चोट तो लगेगी. उसमें क्या बात थी. तो पहला दिन मेरा जो था डिजीज का, उस दिन 15 फोन आए सर्वे टीम से, थाने से, CID से, CMHO से. एक ही सवाल, आप कोरोना पॉजिटिव हो, आपको पता है ना. अच्छा लगा जब CMHO टीम के डॉक्टरों ने फूल देकर होम आइसोलेशन किया. That was my first day. Then सच्चाई तब पता लगी जब कई लोग रोज घूमते थे मेरे घर के सामने की सड़क पर. अब नहीं दिखे तो चिंता हुई. फोन करने पर मालूम हुआ घूमने की सड़क बदल दी. कुछ लोग चलते थे मेरे घर के पास वाली पटरी पर, अब चलते हैं सड़क पार दूसरी ओर की पटरी पर. स्वीपर घर पर आती नहीं, पुकारते हैं तो सुनती नहीं. कपड़े धोने वाली को हमने अपनी ओर से मना कर दिया. अगले दिन उसका फोन आया, सबने उसे आने से मना कर दिया कि डॉक्टर साहब के यहाँ काम करती थी. पत्नी सरिता पानी और खाना देने तो आती है, लेकिन डबल मास्क लगा कर आती है और मेरे कमरे में सांस रोक कर रखती है. कोरोना ने जीना सिखाया, बुरा महसूस ना करना सिखाया. माई इंट्रोस्पेक्शन. मन अपना जब टटोला तो पाया मैं भी तो ऐसा ही करता था तिरस्कार. पहले विदेशों से आए अमीरों से, फिर दिल्ली से आए जमातियों से, और फिर बस और ट्रेनों से आए मजदूरों से. और आज वही तिरस्कार मेरे लिए भी झलकता है दोस्तों. और तो और कोरोना का कोई रोगी जब आता था तो भय के कारण मेरे व्यवहार में भी तिरस्कार झलकने लगता था. कोरोना ने जीना सिखाया, बुरा ने महसूस करना सिखाया. रियलाइजेशन ऑफ गॉड. तभी नजर गई खिड़की पर, बारिश की बूंदों पर. मेरे घर को उन्होंने टाला नहीं. नजर पड़ी सूरज की किरणों पर, मेरी खिड़की से घर में आना छोड़ा नहीं. तभी खिड़की से आई बारिश की हवा ने मेरे बदन को धीरे से छुआ, छोड़ा नहीं. नजर पड़ी खिड़की से बाहर लगे हरे भरे पेड़ पौधों पर, आज भी वहीं खड़े मेरा अभिवादन करते हैं. कोरोना ने जीना सिखाया, बुरा ने महसूस करना सिखाया. निश्चय किया अब मेरे व्यवहार में स्नेह झलकेगा, तिरस्कार नहीं। पेशेंट के फोन जीने का मकसद बताते हैं। देशभक्त निशांत और रिश्तेदारों के फोन हौसला बढ़ाते हैं। शुभ चिंतकों के फोन मन को मजबूत करते हैं। बच्चों, पापा, मम्मी और परिवारजन के फोन दिल को छूते हैं। दोस्तों के चटपटे फोन बड़े अच्छे लगते हैं, आनंदित करते हैं, गुदगुदाते हैं। आज जब मेरी सभी की कोरोना रिपोर्ट नेगेटिव आई तो समझा, अरे यही तो सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग थी। ये 26 जुलाई की बात है। नतीजा, मेरे से किसी को फैला नहीं कोरोना। अब कर पाऊंगा ज़्यादा अच्छी पेशेंट का केयर और दे पाऊंगा प्लाज्मा भी दान। कोरोना ने जीना सिखाया, बुरा ने महसूस करना सिखाया। लेकिन फ्रेंड्स, बिकॉज माय एज वो 67, तो हमारा प्लाज्मा तो डॉक्टर एस अग्रवाल ने लिया ही नहीं। फिर क्या करते, तो हमने कहा कि हम ड्यूटी जब ज्वाइन करेंगे देन वी शुड स्टार्ट कोविड हॉस्पिटल। और 1 अगस्त आई ज्वाइन ड्यूटी एंड वी स्टार्टेड राजस्थान कोविड हॉस्पिटल, RHL कोविड हॉस्पिटल. So friends, that was all. If you have any question, curiosity, it will be nice and I'll be happy to answer you. Thank you very much. Thank you to IMA Rajasthan branch. Long live IMA.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a very informative information packed in a nutshell about the recent approach to management of COVID-19 infection. And in addition to that, the color of your personal experience kept everybody engaged in the presentation and also gave us a philosophical message to take home as a meaning for our lives. So I'm grateful for all that you have shared here. Regarding question and answers, sir, as you say, or we can take them together after the...
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Now coming to our next panelist. So we have amongst us Dr. Shitu Singh. She is a pulmonologist. She is an associate professor in Institute of Respiratory Disease in SMS Medical College, Jaipur. She is well known at this young age. She is quite renowned in the academic circles as well as for her hard work and clinical expertise. She is a visiting fellow in the Interventional Pulmonology in the Cleveland Clinic in the United States of America. And she's also the assistant editor of the Lung India Journal. And she's a member of experts who are formulating the Indian bronchoscopy guidelines. So a lot of work at your hand, Dr. Shitu. So I request you to take over from here and present amongst us your presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, respected chairpersons, seniors, dear friends and colleagues. I have been assigned a very interesting and relevant topic in today's times: pulmonary complications and management to recovery. This is what the Worldometer shows today. India has slowly and steadily risen to the second position. But when we look carefully, what we also see is that a large number of people who have recovered from this illness. And with this number does come the complications, the sequelae of COVID. What are the sequelae of COVID? These include fatigue, body aches, poor exercise capacity, thromboembolism, cardiac manifestations such as tachycardia, myocarditis, polyneuropathy, and depression and anxiety, which Raghav would be speaking in a short while. In addition, these patients may have sleep dysfunction. And one, last but not the least, exacerbation of the underlying comorbid condition. So many times what happens is that we get preoccupied with treating COVID and forget to treat the underlying comorbid condition of the patient, which may subsequently lead to mortality. Coming to the pulmonary sequelae to COVID-19 pneumonia. These include cough, exertional dyspnea, chest congestion, pulmonary fibrosis, and something that has not been talked about much, the long-term side effect of the drugs that we are using. So relatively, this was a novel infection. And in our haste to treat, we have been using drugs indiscriminately. What about the side effects? Say, for example, tocilizumab, a drug which is an immunosuppressant. And this is of particular relevance to our country, India, where tuberculosis is a pandemic. What about the latent tuberculosis that many of these patients would be having, and subsequently a tubercular infection in the subsequent months to follow? Can we have a reference from the past pandemics? Yes. So the coronavirus also caused some small epidemics of SARS and MERS in the past years. For example, when we look at the complications of those patients who recovered from SARS, it was found that almost 36% of the patients at 12 weeks had residual chest X-ray abnormality. At 6 months, 30% had persisting airspace opacification. Patients of higher risk of developing this fibrosis were older people, those who required ICU. Similarly, if we look at MERS, at 6 weeks, 36% of these patients had residual chest X-ray changes. Let us have a look at the swine flu epidemic that we faced a couple of years back. This was a case report that we published a few years back of 2 patients of swine flu pneumonia that we followed up. And what we found out was that this was a resolving phase. So panel A here shows consolidation, and this has subsequently turned into fibrosis, but it was resolving. Similarly, if we look at the spirometry, it shows a rise in the FVC over the years. Let me share with you experience of what we have faced in the past few months. So this was a patient who presented in March, one of the early cases at RUHS. He came out to be COVID positive, and at that time, we treated the patient with lopinavir, ritonavir, some oxygen, and despite all this, it took some time for the patient to recover. This was a CT scan that was done in March 2020, which shows patchy, bilateral areas of ground glass and consolidation. Subsequently, after 1 month, when the patient was discharged, patient still complained of some chest congestion. And a follow-up scan here shows a marked resolution of the pneumonia, but what stays and persists is these fibrotic bands and some areas of ground glass. Let me share with you another case. So this was a more recent one, a 57-year-old COVID positive with difficulty in breathing. And this was a CT scan that was done on day 3 of the illness. What is markedly different from the case first is that you can see some fibrosis at the onset. So there is traction bronchiectasis, interlobular septal thickening, and bronchiolectasis. Let me share with you the third presentation. So this was the one that got published in the ERJ, and what the column A here shows, ground glass consolidation, and the patient was on ventilator. Subsequent to the resolution of this phase, you can see marked honeycombing and pulmonary fibrosis. So what we can see from these 3 cases is that there can be either some parenchymal bands, or there can be some subtle changes of fibrosis, or third, there can be frank honeycombing. So as is the presentation of COVID, so is the presentation of the pulmonary fibrosis that follows COVID. And not only this, there have been reports of exacerbation of the underlying ILDs, the lung conditions, with COVID superimposed infections. The next question is, what is the prevalence of this post-COVID fibrosis? So data on the prevalence is still emerging. The cohort from London shows that almost 15% of the patients had CT changes. Longitudinal cohort from the South Korean data showed that 94% had residual changes. So again, a lot depends on the inclusion criteria of these studies, on the frequency of CT scans, the frequency of the lung functions and the spirometry. So the prevalence is varying depending on the inclusion criteria. Were they taking mild cases or moderate cases or severe cases, and how they were following up, either with a CT scan or with the X-ray or with a spirometry. So this study here shows beautifully CT scans done at 1 month interval, and the most common abnormality was ground glass, fibrosis, bronchovascular bundle distortion, thickening of pleura, and small effusions. So for most of the discharged patients, 2 weeks after discharge might be an optimal time, or it may be a little bit too soon. You can follow up at 4 weeks also. So here there are diverging data coming up, follow up at 2 weeks or 4 weeks, but the bottom line is that you need to follow up. So here is an editorial. So as was the pandemic of COVID infection, so was a pandemic of publications. So we have publications from right, left, and center. And many times they may not be up to good quality also. So here, there are opinions and they have to be taken with a pinch of salt. So you read the data, but you have to interpret it very carefully. This is an editorial, and what it says, again, it shows that there is some fibrosis in these patients and how to go about this. So acute COVID pneumonia, you have the patient in hospital, you give antiviral therapy. Subsequently, as the patient resolves, the patient may be having bacterial superinfection, microvascular damage, patient may be on ventilator, and at that time you also need to start adjuvant steroid therapy or anti-inflammatory therapy. Subsequently, there is the evolutive phase, and then there is a questionable role of antifibrotics that is coming up in COVID-associated fibrosis, depending upon the fibrotic susceptibility. That means the individual susceptibility, the genetic composition, the aging, comorbidities, the smoking and the air pollution the patient is exposed. And this subsequently leads to impaired gas diffusion, restrictive abnormalities, leading to a reduced exercise capacity, reduced overall quality of life, and the survival is still speculative. We still need more prospective study to say whether these patients would be having a worse survival. So what is the mechanism of this pulmonary fibrosis that I have been talking since quite some time? Number 1 is the TGF-beta pathway. Number 2 is the ACE2 and the angiotensin 2 pathway. And I would not be going to that in detail. But I would still be talking about what are the risk factors for this pulmonary fibrosis. Number 1 is age. Elderly are more predisposed because we have already seen ILD occurring more in elderly. For example, IPF. Number 2 is the severity of illness. And what are the hallmark for a severe disease? 1 is a serum LDH, CRP, and the interleukin-6. So in an elderly with raised parameters, the probability of fibrosis does increase. The third point here is the length of ICU stay and mechanical ventilation. Longer the ICU stay, longer the patient has been on the ventilator, longer is the barotrauma and more the chances of fibrosis. Number 4, smoking. Yes, my friends, smoking does predispose to a severe illness and 2.4 times higher risk of death from COVID. Number 5 is chronic alcoholism. And number 6, CT features showing irregular interface sign and parenchymal bands would subsequently lead to pulmonary fibrosis in the later months. How to go about it? So once the patient has been discharged, you can set up a telephonic consultation or a video call with the patient at 4 to 6 weeks. At this point, you also need to rule out pulmonary embolism. And you also have to go with a post-COVID-19 holistic assessment. Subsequent to this, at 12 weeks, a chest X-ray, face-to-face clinical assessment. Again, if the patient has pulmonary embolism, you need to follow the patient up. Again, echo and a holistic assessment. And subsequently, if you find that the X-ray is abnormal, a lung function is abnormal, or the 6-minute walk test is abnormal, you go ahead with a HRCT. So the bottom line of this complicated flowchart is that the test to be done at 3-month follow-up at least is a chest X-ray, spirometry, 6-minute. Any of these three are abnormal, you go ahead with a repeat CT scan and then judge accordingly. So suppose this CT scan shows a COVID pulmonary fibrosis. How to go about? So corticosteroid, the patient may already be on a tapering dose of corticosteroid. 2, at 3 months, you can judge to start an antifibrotic such as pirfenidone or probably nintedanib. The third is N-acetylcysteine. Spironolactone is another drug that there have been few case reports, and anticoagulants. Corticosteroids. So the recovery trial has shown that dexamethasone in the acute phase improves outcome in COVID. This may suggest that in follow-up phase, corticosteroids may have role, because what we see on the CT scan is an organizing pneumonia pattern or ground glass, and all these respond very nicely to corticosteroids. However, there is no evidence-based protocol as yet. More data is required. However, anecdotally, a 4-week regime of prednisolone may be associated with accelerated in patients presenting with inflammatory COVID. They may have a faster resolution. What about antifibrotic? So there is a coming up role of antifibrotic in post-COVID fibrosis. Pirfenidone has a pleiotropic effect and it reduces fibrosis in n number of ways. The rationale for considering antifibrotic is based on the spectrum of pulmonary fibrotic disease observed in COVID-19. However, all these data are from either small case reports or reviews. So we still need a randomized controlled trial before we can, recommend using antifibrotics in these patients. So pirfenidone could be safe add-on to current protocols with trivial side effects and plenty of potential benefits, but all these are from in vitro studies. We still need RCTs to say that. So this was the first part. Moving on to the next part of the talk. Let me ask you a question. What is the difference in between this boy infringing on fast food and this very active boy who's climbing a mountain? So this boy has been conditioned to sit and eat, and when you ask him to run, he may not be able to run even 100 meters. Whereas this boy, he can climb mountains. And the difference between these two is training. Imagine if this is what training can do to healthy individuals. Imagine the effect of training on patients with diseased lungs or diseased bodies. So let us have a look at the role of pulmonary rehabilitation in COVID-19. So this was a randomized controlled trial which found that rehabilitation done in one group of elderly patients and another group did not undergo rehabilitation. So they found that 6-week pulmonary rehab improves the respiratory function, the quality of life, and reduces the anxiety. You can clearly see in this graph that the blue here shows the patients who underwent rehabilitation had a better 6-minute walk distance as compared to those patients who did not. The interventions that they used in this group was the respiratory muscle training, the cough exercise, diaphragmatic breathing, stretching exercises, and home exercises. The points to remember is that you need to assess the patient before you start or enroll him in a rehabilitation program. Ask the patient to do a breath hold test, do a 1-minute step-up test, and ask the patient to squat. If all these the patient is able to do, and the patient's saturation is more than 90, cardiovascular, he has a stable condition, and the dyspnea score is also less, you can enroll the patient. And subsequent, the points to remember is that you can do it through the telemedicine mode. Thus, you have minimal contact with the patient. The program should be self-supervised. So mild disease can be taken care of at home, and moderate to severe, you may require in-hospital rehab programs. So let me quickly go through this program. The first and most vital point is patient education. You need to educate the patient about the disease and assure them. You need to educate that the comorbids like diabetes needs to be controlled. Encourage good lifestyle habits like sleep, hydration, nutrition. One of the most common questions asked is what to eat. So probably a good protein diet would be good for the patient. The next is a physical activity recommendation. If the box dyspnea scale is less than 3, recommend exercises 1 to 2 times per day, 3 to 4 times a week. Now this question actually came up in the chat box also. So whoever asked, for them, I have clarified it here. The duration has to be 10 to 15 minutes for the first 3 to 4 sections, and incrementally you can increase to almost 45 minutes. Exercise type, walking, biking, whatever the patient is comfortable with. Incremental increase every 2 to 3 sessions. 3 sessions do the same and then subsequently step up. The next part is the psychological intervention, which I think Raghav would be speaking on later. The next is airway clearing. It is very important because a lot of airway secretions get pulled up. The expectorant hygiene is also very important. The patient expectorates should be put in a closed container to prevent aerosolization of the sputum, and the huff technique, which I would be talking in a short while. Breathing exercises is also important, which includes diaphragmatic breathing, pursed lip breathing, active abdominal contraction, and also singing. Again, frequency 2 to 3 times every day, 10 to 15 minutes for the first 3 to 4 sessions, and incrementally increase. So this is the first thing that I would be talking is the pursed lip breathing. The thing is, a lot of our COPD patients are already doing it. When they breathe out, you just ask them to breathe out through a whistle like this. This creates a positive pressure and helps in exhalation and prevents air trapping. The second part here is diaphragmatic breathing, particularly in patients because they breathe at a higher rate and thus their respiratory muscles get fatigued. So this is to train the diaphragm to help in the respiration. So when the patient inhales, the abdomen should come out as is shown in the first picture. And when the patient exhales, the abdomen should move inside. The other components of pulmonary rehab include smoking cessation, clearing of airway secretion, breathing techniques, exercises, energy conservation, and fatigue obviation. So fatigue is an important component. What you can suggest your patients is that when they want to walk and they feel fatigued or difficulty in breathing, they should stand, take a deep breath in, and when they are exhaling, they walk. So the inspiration is the active process, and when the patient stands, the whole effort will go in the inspiration, and exhalation is the passive process. So when the patient walks, the patient should exhale. The last part is the patient education. So this another video that I want to show here is the huff cough technique. So the patient should be sitting upright. 3 times diaphragmatic breathing should be done. Deep breath in, abdomen out. Breathe out, abdomen inside. After that, the arms should be bent and close to the chest. Then raise the elbow and hold the breath. And then exhale forcefully. And this exhalation would help in bringing the secretion out, which is a very common problem in not only COVID-associated pneumonia, but in any resolving pneumonitis. Another aspect that I want to talk about is proning. That is lying down on the chest. So what it does is it helps in better ventilation, better body movements, and clearance of the secretions. What actually, so when you look at the first figure, this is a supine position. So air is lighter, so more of the alveoli that are in the anterior portion would get distended. When the supine position is adopted, the posterior alveoli are recruited, which help in better ventilation. In fact, even in patients who are in home quarantine, they should adopt this. That is, when they are lying down, 30 minutes on the belly, 30 minutes on right side, 30 minutes sitting up, then 30 minutes on the left side. And again, you start the cycle. I will just repeat it once more. 30 minutes on the belly, 30 minutes right side, 30 minutes sitting up, and 30 minutes on the left side. So this would help in better alveolar recruitment, better ventilation. So pulmonary rehabilitation is a multidisciplinary approach where the pulmonary disease, including the pre-existing disease, the post-COVID pulmonary disease is taken care of. The physical polymyopathy, polyneuropathy is addressed, the mood and the memory concentration, which I think Raghav would be taking now. So the learning point is that pulmonary rehabilitation is an important component of inpatient rehabilitation as well as I think outpatient also to improve the functional exercise capacity, aerobic capacity and quality of life. Patient would benefit from incorporation of pulmonary rehab along with interdisciplinary treatment while in acute inpatient as well as outpatient settings. My take-home message is that given the brunt of disease that we are facing, I think in the following months, we would be having a burden of disability due to the post-COVID sequelae. Rehabilitation plays a pivotal role here to improve and restore the lung functions and reduce the disability. The post-COVID sequelae include fatigue, poor exercise capacity, thromboembolism, myocarditis, polyneuropathy, and sleep dysfunction. Pulmonary sequelae is pulmonary fibrosis, symptoms being cough, congestion, dyspnea, treatment, corticosteroids, antifibrotic, and most importantly, pulmonary rehabilitation, which takes care of the nutrition, posture, clearance of secretion, breathing exercises, stretching, and education. And in the end, I know, friends, the situation is grim. However, there is light at the end of every tunnel. So let's keep moving and have faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shitu. So despite the presentation being packed with technical information ready to use on hands, but still you made it interesting. We kept our attention and a lot of questions and queries have been generated, which I have been noting down. So we will take them up. And now I'll just give a brief about my talk, which is about managing the psychiatric problems or the psychiatric stresses in the relation to the COVID-19 illnesses. So, yeah. So I guess now the screen is shared. So as the topic of today's webinar is about experience sharing, specifically in addition to the clinical and the technical and theoretical parts. So I would focus on experience sharing equally. So scope of this presentation of mine is about the psychiatric disorders and COVID-19, substance use or addictive disorders in COVID-19, suicidality and COVID-19, medications for psychiatric disorders and the COVID-19 medications and their interactions, and finally a take-home message. So let's begin with stress. There is a common tendency for people, including even the medical professionals, to not be able to differentiate well between stress-related symptoms and the problems due to independent psychiatric disorders. Like, what is stress? So stress is an experience of body and mind. That is, you have both psychological and physical symptoms like palpitations or a feeling in your stomach, along with a psychological feeling of being not able to relax, being stressed. When there is a discrepancy in the demands of a situation, let's take for example COVID-19, and your resources, biological, social, or psychological, to deal with them. So when you feel that you won't be able to deal with the situation, it leads to frustration and stress. And there are a lot of symptoms due to that. These stress-related symptoms need to be differentiated from independent psychiatric problems like long-standing anxiety disorders or depressive disorders, or even new developing ones. But how to do that? So after pondering for some time, I thought that my talk should be more like an awareness and overall concept understanding about stress-related and long-standing psychiatric illnesses, especially in relation to COVID-19. So rather than me having any specifics to diagnose things like low mood for how many days or how many hours, it's more about how to understand that this low mood or feeling lack of energy and other psychiatric symptoms like anxiety, how to approach them in patients with COVID-19. So first, about the psychiatric disorders, they can be easily understood in three broad headings: those who have pre-existing disorders, those who develop problems related to the stress of COVID-19. And why I mention that, because they generally recover well after the stress of COVID-19 is over. And those who develop new onset psychiatric problems which persist even after their stress related to COVID-19 is over. So simply pre-existing disorders, there can be many: bipolar, depression, anxiety, including OCD, schizophrenia. What we see is that stress of any kind, including COVID, generally leads to aggravation or breakthrough symptoms in patients who were even previously stable on treatment. And other adverse factors due to COVID-19 include avoiding regular follow-ups as people are afraid of catching corona infections, then poor medication adherence, as well as a disturbed social support in these COVID times, which leads to destabilization of people with pre-existing psychiatric disorders. And let's simply take a case unit for this. Mr. G is a person suffering from OCD who had repeated compulsions to clean, to hand wash, and who was previously able to manage his compulsions well, has now developed, who is, just a second. Are you able to hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we are able. Yes, we can hear you, Raghav.
Okay, okay. So, we can see there is some problem. Just a second. Just give me a minute. Yeah, so I'll go back to my screen. There was some issue.
Maybe Dr. Raghav, you can start resharing again. Yeah.
Yeah, so a person suffering from OCD who is previously stable now develops new onset and is the exacerbation of previous symptoms like repeated cleaning, hand washing, and in addition, these patients might develop severe depressive symptoms which they would even prevent from taking consultations even online because there is a lack of motivation. So we can just see from this case unit how COVID-19 creating problems for people with previously existing psychiatric disorders. Then there are the stress related or adjustment disorders related to COVID-19. So here people come with mixed presentations of either feeling anxious or depressive or a combination of these. And most commonly they are misattributing benign physical sensations like mild difficulty in breathing on climbing stairs, which might be explained well by their age. Maybe the person is 50, 60 years of age, but they misattribute this, and then the cycle of anxiety adds to it. The symptoms further aggravate. Mostly these limited experiences are related to the stress and resolve well with patient education and counseling. If they are well educated about the differentiation between COVID-related symptoms and these stress, anxiety-related symptoms, and given symptomatic treatment, most of these patients resolve both the stress-related as well as COVID-related anxiety. But some persons among these may have more severe symptoms, and these people would need psychiatric consultations. And mostly, if we go back in their personalities, we find that they have some maladaptive personality traits, like they get easily anxious about many situations, not just COVID related, but in past also they have not coped well with stressful situations. Let's take an example. So, Mr. HK, 26-year-old, previously healthy person, presented with abrupt onset shortness of breath to a pulmonology OPD. And despite adequate investigations and symptomatic treatment, he did not improve. So he was referred for a psychiatric consultation where he was found to have mixed anxiety depressive symptoms, which were there on a background of an anancastic personality. So people with anancastic personalities are those who want things to be perfect. So some change, mild change in their breathing pattern or the way they get tired easily generates a lot of anxiety and depressive reactions. But again, these are stress related. That is the stress of contracting COVID increases these problems. But otherwise, these patients might have recovered. But this patient, as he had a predisposition towards stress, anxiety disorders in terms of his anancastic personality, so he was started on a SSRI and significant relief was seen over 5 to 6 days itself. Now coming to psychiatric disorders which can be precipitated by COVID-19 experience. So persons who respond to stress in a very unfavorable way and have increased severity of these anxiety or depressive symptoms, or have developed a post-traumatic or a feeling wherein they are not able to come out of their COVID-19 related problems, may be hospitalization for COVID-19 or seeing some near and dear one with COVID-19, which leads to a post-traumatic stress disorder. And sometimes some patients might even develop a psychotic or a manic breakdown. So these kind of people go on to develop independent psychiatric disorders. So these will not be resolved even if their COVID-19 related problems are resolved, and they would need regular psychiatric treatment. So this is the differentiation that we require between COVID-19 stress-related symptoms and independent psychiatric disorders. A typical case example would be a person 23 years old who is a biology student, presents with extreme agitation, no sleep, excessive talk. Family members described that previously she used to be very fearful of COVID-19 and would quarrel with family members for not taking adequate precautions. But now she says that she is immune from COVID-19 and would not take any precautions. So this is very surprising. A person changed over such a short duration. And this is where we can diagnose her as a manic episode with psychotic symptoms. So these are some kind of people who develop independent psychiatric disorders and would need regular treatment. Now coming to substance use and addictive disorders, as Dr. Shitu had also pointed out that smoking and alcohol lead to adverse effect on COVID-19 recovery, even other drugs, because there is a lifestyle associated with substance use. These people are generally thrill seeking or have a risky lifestyle. They might just brush off by saying that nothing would happen if I smoke 2 more cigarettes. And to smoke that cigarettes, people would not be able to take the precautions that they take. They would be handed over cigarettes by somebody at a shop. They would smoke it. They would puff air to a long distance. They also have reduced immunity in chronic substance users, and poor response and interactions with many medications are seen in active substance users. So overall, substance use is a risk factor both for contracting COVID-19 infection as well as for recovery from the infection. And in addition, stress and isolation, especially in the lockdown period that we have seen, we saw that some people would say that we have stopped taking substances because they were not available. But we have seen that people who are dependent went to great lengths to procure alcohol or cigarettes at a huge cost. And after the lockdown was over, many people have actually increased their substance use and are now seeking treatment related to problems for that. So for a typical case, an occasional alcohol user till 1 year back who lost his job started daily alcohol use in lockdown. And as he started to take alcohol daily, his craving further increased and he bought more alcohol despite difficult financial conditions. And he presented to emergency one day with dyspnea. Echocardiography was done and it was suggestive of a dilated cardiomyopathy, which could easily have been contributed a lot by alcohol use also. And he was also found to be COVID-19 positive. So, and now coming to suicidality. So suicidality is a huge problem with COVID-19 patients, both outpatients as well as significantly inpatients. As Dr. Virendra sir had mentioned about people who committed suicide in Rajasthan University hospitals, we can see that suicidality is generally not assessed by treating doctors because people with suicidal intents generally do not come across very openly. So here I would first of all say, to assess suicidality, it's very important to keep in mind that people can develop suicidal intent, especially in isolation of COVID hospitals, in a scenario where they are not accompanied by any relatives. In fact, people have generally given up on them, that unless they get treated, they would not be given company by them. So in that context and that grim scenario of COVID-19 hospitalization, we should keep in mind that people can develop this intent. And it is important to specially focus on people who are having more severe illness or have somehow understood that they have a more adverse prognosis in recovery. So we should ask them some simple questions like, do you sometimes wish you were better dead? Or do you feel some passive death wishes? Have you made a plan to die? Do you imagine what would happen after you're dead? And have you made an attempt at self-harm in the past? These are some very common questions from most of suicidality assessment scales. What is important is we address these questions to people who we find at risk. And now for a case minute, Mr. G, 47-year-old, had difficulty in breathing and was diagnosed with COVID-19 and hospitalized. She was extremely stressed, isolated. Over next to three days, she became convinced that her current illness was a punishment for her previous bad behaviors. So in this delusional level of conviction, she actually carried out her suicidal attempt and she died due to it. She left a note which mentioned that she punished herself before anybody else could. So we can understand that some of the people may be very few, but we should not lose people to suicide. They might have recovered well from COVID-19 and went home. And now coming to medications for psychiatric disorders and COVID-19. We have seen that many psychiatric side effects of COVID-19 medications are also seen. Some of them are commonly delirium, which is multifactorial, can be contributed to by the adverse overall situation of the patient due to COVID-19. But we should be watchful for delirium. It can present with multifarious symptoms, mostly anxiety and stress related in the initial 1 or 2 days, and then going on to develop a frank disorientation, psychotic symptoms, and which can lead to even suicidality. Second, corticosteroids are commonly known for psychiatric side effects, including depression, mania, psychosis. Chloroquine has also been studied for its tendency to aggravate or precipitate new onset psychosis. Then there are medical side effects of psychiatric medications. Many of our patients would be taking psychiatric medications and they can have adverse liver or hematological myocarditis causing arrhythmia or even fever for specifically drugs like clozapine, which could lead to a decrease in the blood counts. And then there are a lot of drug interactions. We have to be careful which antivirals specifically are enzyme inducers and how they interact with the ongoing psychiatric medications. For example, there have been case reports of people who were given remdesivir and they developed sudden onset hypotension, diaphoresis, shivering. And I know of a case report where a person who was previously diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder on diagnosed with COVID-19 pneumonia was given remdesivir, and his complaints were brushed aside as a panic attack, but they did not improve with low dose clonazepam. So we need to be aware of the medication interactions also. And finally, prevention of development of psychiatric problems in COVID-19 patients is very important. Psychological first aid as a concept is must for all COVID positive persons. And as Sir had mentioned, we are doing it for all our COVID positive patients who are with us. We explain them the prognosis well. We are open to listening to their queries and emphasize that they are not alone. And there is a special emphasis given to increasing optimism, like the worldometer statistics that we just see. We should also look towards the recovery rates, the positive things, so that overall a person heals. and not leaving people alone. Smartphones are a very important tool in then regular visits by health staff, online consultations, distractive measures in rooms of people in COVID wards like televisions, internet activities that can be done by self like reading, practicing healthy coping skills like meditation, a very light exercise or venting out, that is talking out their feelings, discussing with doctors, sleep hygiene, regular schedule, and self-help literature can be very helpful in preventing development of stress-related independent psychiatric problems. And to come to the last, the take-home message of this presentation would be that we should be aware that people can develop psychiatric problems which are not just stress-related, but might be going on for a longer duration. And in addition to that, we need to have these basic things that we should ask: history of psychiatric problems, current distress and psychiatric symptoms on follow-up, and suicidal intent and medications that are being taken. And advice should be given for counsel for mild to moderate problems to and referral for a psychiatric consultation wherever the problems are severe. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raghav, for such a wonderful description about the psychiatry and the depression patients are facing nowadays. And now I think we should move ahead for our Q&A session. So would request you to take the questions to our respected speakers. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Mayuri, we have a lot of questions at our hand.
Yes.
I tried to sort these questions into relevant groups. And I must say Dr. Shitu has answered to a few of them already. So now, as I have sorted down into groups, I would be sorry that I won't be able to name people who have asked these questions, but they would understand that their questions are taken up. So I would first like to begin with the question about Favipiravir. So there are a lot of questions about Favipiravir. I would request Dr. Shitu to give a brief about indications, the day when it should be initiated, can be given up to how many days? These are the questions.
So I think Favipiravir presently is used for mild illness when the saturation is fine and the patient is at home. However, there are still not very good studies, randomized controlled studies to document its role. The AIMS guidelines that has come up recently does not recommend the use. But for those who have been using, this initiation in the first 7 days is advisable since it's antiviral and that's when, the most viral load would be. So Favipiravir is given in 200 mg, 9 tablets in the morning, 9 tablets in the evening on day 1, and subsequently 4 tablets in the morning and 4 tablets in the evening for the subsequent days.
Okay, thank you. Next question is to Dr. Virendra sir. So the question is comparison of hydroxychloroquine with ivermectin, and also to shed some light on dose and the prophylactic potential of ivermectin.
Very relevant question. The reason being, as I said, that many things are placebo therapy, but there is some effect. In musculoskeletal, yes, hydroxychloroquine is good enough. 400 milligram twice a day, and subsequently 200 milligram twice a day next 4 days. That is the dose which is recommended by ICMR for treatment of COVID patients. And for ivermectin, 12 milligram twice a day, 5 to 7 days is the dose which is prescribed to the adult persons.
Okay, thank you, sir. So next question to you again would be, during isolation period, is it good to do breathing exercises, walking, or other light exercises?
Very important and very curious question. The reason is that if you, in that quarantine period or isolation period, when you are absolutely free, and if you don't have symptoms, significant morbidity, then these exercises are good enough. But if lung involvement is there, suppose pneumonia is there almost 12 to 24 level, then if comfortably it is not done, you feel pain or chest pain, at that time this should not be done.
Okay. So thank you, sir. Next question to Dr. Shitu. How much is the incubation period for generating antibodies in COVID-19?
I think it takes around 7 days at least to have the small titers, and subsequently it keeps on increasing till 3 to 4 months time. So the NEJM study that was on the antibodies, it showed that they were persisting till at least 4 months, and we would be having new studies which would give us a longer follow-up data.
Okay, thank you. Next question to Dr. Virendra Singh. It is addressed by your name. What is the role of methylene blue in COVID treatment?
It has been said that if inhaled methylene blue is given, then it acts on the glutathione mechanism of antioxidant and it is useful. But again, it is anecdotal reports. There has not been any properly conducted scientific studies, but it is good if these can be performed now.
Okay, sir. Next question is for Dr. Shitu. It is about what is the probability of spread by asymptomatic people?
I think that's a very brilliant question. We have been like for 3 months of a lockdown when everyone was scared for transmission from even asymptomatic individuals. But the newer data now suggests that asymptomatic individuals do not spread the infection, and they even don't develop antibodies. And third, they may develop actual infection later on. So simply a swab that is positive, the patient may not develop symptoms, they may not develop antibodies, and they may not even spread the infection.
Okay. Next question again for you. So it is regarding when COVID recovered patients can be taken for elective surgery. The question is not very detailed, but what I guess is about safety of the medical.
So it depends on the type of surgery. If it's an emergency surgeries, people are performing. Even at RUH's, a couple of surgeries, emergency surgeries for perforated peritoneum and all, they were have been conducted by taking proper precaution using PPE kit. Elective surgeries have to be delayed for at least a month's time, and probably more also. We would need a COVID report before that.
Okay. Question for Dr. Virendra, sir. Sir, is there any role for inhaled budesonide?
Yes, these are the words of university from which it emerges many times, but there have not been any studies that budesonide, yes, oral steroid or injectable dexamethasone 6 milligram has shown to reduce mortality is in England, and that was the basic, that was properly conducted study. So either we give dexamethasone or methylprednisolone is also equally effective.
The next question again to you. It is about intravenous corticosteroid versus oral dexamethasone in hypoxic stage. Which is more effective, which should be preferred?
Almost equally effective, but in acute crisis and acute respiratory failure, usually absorption is also hampered. So in such scenario, it is preferable that we should use parenteral intravenous dexamethasone.
Okay. And sir, another question to you. It is post-COVID, when do you resume your sense of smell?
In our, though it has not been mentioned, but probably in our setup, clinical experience, it appears that within 2 weeks of anosmia, again patient regains his capability.
Okay. Next question to Dr. Shitu. It is about what is the cause of happy hypoxia?
That's a very interesting question, but I'm not really sure whether I have the answer to this. So it is evident many of our patients are, having a decreased saturation, but probably, the receptors are not sending the signals. So dyspnea is actually when you start feeling breathlessness, your brain tells you that you are breathing more number of times. So probably there may be some receptor dysregulation. Uh, I think Dr. Virendra Singh would be able to tell more. I'm sorry, I know that much only.
Rightly you have said. Rightly you have said very well. Happy hypoxia is a terminology which is used very only in exceptional circumstances. It is not very common a phenomenon, but where patient fails to perceive the sensation of breathlessness, in that scenario, he doesn't take any assistance of medical people. The result is he dies even at home. So initial reports were there that many patients of COVID develops pneumonia without his perception. That is true also. And that's why the oximeter are everywhere in every home, that is preventing such complication.
Okay, sir. So next question for you is, what is the best time to give plasma therapy? When should we consider?
Plasma therapy, usually it is taken as magic therapy, one. And second, it is considered that it should be given in serious patients. But both are wrong. It is not a magic therapy, it is a marginal therapy, proves in some patient quite effective, proves may not be effective at all in some patients. Usually, it should be given when PO2 FiO2 ratio is more than 200. So you can imagine that it is a condition where serious disease has already been taken place. It doesn't have any role. And after 2 weeks of negative report, usually plasma, one can donate plasma. We should encourage our patients to donate plasma. It is very good, I think. And in private sector also now it is available at Swasthya Kalyan Hospital, Swasthya Kalyan Blood Bank. That is the only private sector where plasmapheresis for COVID patient is available.
Okay, sir. Next. Is there any variation in diurnal viral load? And is there any specific time where testing should be done preferably for COVID-19?
Normally, virus goes and lodges in the throat and nasal passages. So, there is no diurnal fluctuation to best of my knowledge. But proper technique is very important. If the technician is a little bit frightened and he doesn't touches the exact place, touching the exact place and then revolving that stick in round fashion, that is quite important for collection. And that is the reason that many times we get patient that it is post-COVID syndrome. Even today we got patient post-COVID syndrome, suggesting that it is one of the complications in form of ILD. Patient came from Bikaner, we tested again and it was positive. So it is active disease, not post-COVID sequelae.
Okay. And the one question is a broad question. It is about that what is the major thing about protocol of COVID management in Rajasthan that we have good recovery rate? This question is from Maharashtra.
Interesting, very interesting. Since we don't have proper data, that's why exact reply to this question is very difficult. But still, it appears that in Rajasthan we are having less severe morbidity. And second thing is that IMA is actively treating. All IMA linked doctors are actively treating COVID patients. That's why their efficacy is reflected in saving many lives.
Right. Thank you, sir. And now we are reaching towards the end of the question. So for Dr. Shitu, the question is prone position helpful?
Could you please repeat it? Your voice was breaking.
Yeah, I'll repeat. Is prone position helpful in acute asthma in COVID-19 patients like acute asthma and COPD? Like whether should they do that?
Okay, so proning is useful for COVID pneumonia and it is useful for any pneumonia for that matter, but not really for asthma and COPD because recruitment is never a problem there. So anything that fills the alveoli, which can be like a pneumonia or even a heart failure, proning may help. But COPD and asthma are airway diseases and proning would not be beneficial in those.
Okay. And next quick question for you is regarding two drugs, N-acetylcysteine and phenobarbital. How useful they are?
Second drug, which one did you say? Okay, so N-acetylcysteine is a decongestant. It helps in clearing the mucus and whenever patient has symptoms of congestion. And also it has a possible antioxidant effect. The second drug, I'm sorry, my connection is a little bit weak. What did you say?
Fenofibrate.
Fenofibrate. Okay, so I am not really sure about the role of fenofibrate. We are not using it. I have no idea about it.
Right, thank you. To both our speakers, I would say there are a lot of clinical situations. So there are long questions regarding patient reports and other things. So I think they can be taken up personally with you also. You can be contacted online for patients. So I can skip those questions.
I think there are a couple of patients questions for you also.
Yeah, so now I'll come to myself. Yeah. So like coming to myself, one of the question is regarding depression. The other is regarding bipolar disorder. So both of them are different questions. So one of the person is asking that I'm depressed from last 2 months. So I would say that any stress related problem, because even if it's related to COVID-19, so either it resolves or there is some problem, then you get hospitalized and other things happen. So stress related low mood would resolve. It would not continue for 2 months. So if for 2 months a person is feeling depressed, then it deserves a consultation with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So that. And the second question is regarding bipolar disorder. A person who has discontinued medications due to COVID, but now he has uremia and behaving manic. So it's a very important clinical question that mostly people discontinue medications because of thinking that COVID-19 should be dealt with first. It's more important, definitely, because it's life-threatening. But then the person develops these symptoms and now he has uremia also. So the differentiation would be that uremia would lead to an encephalopathy, which would result in a disturbed orientation. So disturbed orientation and a manic picture are completely different. So disturbed orientation in terms of time, place, person, seeing things, those things are there. But in manic state, a person is well oriented about time, where he is, what is the thing that he's doing. But overall, he's excited or in an elevated mood. So I think these things can be differentiated well, but wherever possible, and except for conditions where a person is at a life-threatening stage due to COVID-19 pneumonia, psychiatric medications should generally be continued because the episodes are difficult to resolve once they start. So those are the questions for me. And I think overall we have taken a lot of questions. Any questions, if you can find interesting, you would like to answer by your own interest, can be taken up.
There's, I think, one question getting repeatedly asked is when should we start steroids?
Yeah.
So in the recovery trial, they used steroids only in severe cases. However, what we are currently practicing is any lung involvement with probably, you know, more symptomatic patients, a moderate to severe disease, we are giving steroids. In fact, now we have started it for even patients with lung involvement, but mild cases also. And it is showing very good results. But again, we need, you know, RCTs for the milder cases. We do have RCT for the severe cases.
Okay. And one of the question is regarding what works better, Solu-Medrol or dexamethasone? Continuing question.
There is very little difference between the steroids itself. The thing with dexamethasone is that it causes a lot of adrenal suppression. Second, we are giving dexamethasone only for the initial 6 to 7 days, or, you know, till the patient is in the hospital. But if the patient requires a steroid at the time of discharge, that is, there is some oxygen requirement, or, you know, a dyspnea on exertion, or a low saturation on exertion, we are giving switching the patient to prednisolone or methylprednisolone, because we have always been comfortable with these drugs for ILD, and same goes with probably the post-COVID complications, which is quite similar to the interstitial lung disease.
Okay. One more question is regarding home isolation. So when the decision should be taken to shift to a hospital? Most commonly, people have pulse oximetry available at their homes, BP measurement. So with those kind of things, when they can decide that now time to go to hospital?
I think a very, very important question. I think the whole day we are heralded with the calls that should we keep the patient at home or should we switch to a hospital? So I think pulse oximetry is a boon. We can monitor the patients at home, and whenever the patient has a lot of breathlessness and the saturation that is now even on a declining trend, that initially it was 98 or now it is slowly dipping to anything less than 94, probably, and especially in elderlies, those with comorbid conditions, and probably raised biomarkers we need to admit, or a raised, even increased disease on an X-ray or a CT scan.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now I would request the other two speakers, if you want to take any case-like questions where actually a patient has been described, his parameters are there, so they are in the question and answer box, or would you like to address them at some other platform, maybe via online consultation, or how? So quite a few questions are like that.
I think we can take one. I can take one, and Dr. Virendra Singh can take one, and then I think we can sum it up probably.
Sure.
So here, I think I will read this out. 40-year-old male, COVID positive, day 8 of illness, fever reducing gradually, but complains of dry cough, followed by breathlessness, but saturation is maintained. Patient on ASI for 5 days, prednisolone, paracetamol, steam, no CT done, but X-ray on day 5 is normal. Do you suggest HRCT, or shall just add an anti-allergic or cough suppressant to the prescription? So one of the very common features that the patient, and very disabling, is the cough that may persist. So a cough suppressant should be used definitely, and the saturation here is normal for the patient, but patient is not have, so there are no comorbidities and saturation is maintaining, but there is breathlessness. I think we should go for a CT scan here. What do you suggest? I'll take inputs from Dr. Virendra Singh.
Please, sir.
I think the CT scan is a boom, and by that we can precisely localize that what is the magnitude of involvement of the lungs. If magnitude of involvement is quite high, then probably our action and then the course of steroid duration also changes. So CT scan, low threshold of CT scan is good enough. And then at the same time, we should also go for inflammatory markers. because inflammatory markers will suggest that there is activity of inflammation. Cytokine release syndrome is continuing. Sometimes it continues for longer period, and in those cases, usually complication take place. So we should be alert with that.
Okay. So now still the questions are a lot, but I think constraints of time, we would need to
Probably
submit.
we can send them the personalized replies.
Yes, sir. I was actually suggesting that. So maybe we'll take down the questions and bring them to you. And I have a question for Dr. Virendra Singh, which would sum up the discussion for today. Sir, COVID-19 दोबारा हो सकता है क्या?
and probably I will be the first victim to have that if it will be. Theoretically, yes. Theoretically, yes, because this immunity or the immunity is not long lasting. And then it is not known whether the antibodies which we are having is really protecting us. That is a dilemma. Till now, 3 or 4 cases have been reported globally in the literature. Though many times people say that are uske ho gaya, but it is said. For example, we got a patient who had 3 times negative, but it was positive. So it was technical failure. Or sometimes the viral shedding might have not been at that particular point. So it is continuation of same infection rather than recurrence, which is separated by a couple of months. So only 2 or 3 cases have been reported, not from India, but from Hong Kong and Japan.
Okay, sir. So with this excellent reply, I would bring the question and answer session to an end. And now I would request Dr. Sachin Malhotra, who is the CEO of Medical Learning Hub, to take over.
On his behalf today, I will be the one who will do the vote of thanks. He is busy with another meetings. I apologize for that. So, dear doctors, really appreciate. Thank you so much for the wonderful session you have, done with the Medical Learning Hub platform. It was really a very interactive and very informative session. We would thank IMA Rajasthan, who has given us this opportunity, to conduct this, host this session for them. I would thank Mylan Pharmaceuticals, who has supported this COVID series, like the webinar series which we are doing. Without with support, it was not possible. So thank you everyone for the time. I'm also raising polls. Please do not leave the session just once. We are raising the polls. You can see the polls in front of your screen. So all the participants has to attend those poll questions so that we get the we can do more and more of webinar series with you. So would request to, if you can see the poll questions in front of your screen, please start attempting that polls. They are very general questions. Are you treating COVID-19 patients, or like how many COVID-19 patients you have treated so far?
नहीं कौन से बेड पे है वो कोविड का पेशेंट है क्या?
Meanwhile, we are taking polls. I would request Dr. Thareja sir to conclude it with vote of thanks.
हाँ एक बार आप क्या वेबिनार में बोलने का आ गया मेरा नंबर.
First type of the seminar, and thankful to Mylan Pharmaceutical for sponsoring such type of the webinars. I hope in future they will continue such type of the education program. I'm also thankful to my audience who are regularly listening this program, and very useful by the senior most doctors of the Rajasthan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Hello, हाँ मनु.
Yeah.
Patient है क्या?
We have received around 42% of the poll questions. So we'll be here for a few more minutes so that we receive all the questions. Thank you, participants. Thank you, speakers, moderators, sir. SS Agrawal sir, Tharija sir, for taking out the time and enlightening us with this knowledge. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So when can we bring the to an end, Dr. Mayuri?
Yeah. Thank you everyone for your sparing your time and participating in this webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Virendra sir. Thank you, Dr. Raghav sir. Thank you, Neetu ma'am. I would request all the attendees, please provide your feedback in the option of polls. So we have your feedback, and we'll conduct more webinars like this. And if you have any query, please write to us on info@medicallearninghub.com. So that is our supporting email address. So our team will going to reply you back with the valid answers. And the recording of this webinar will be shortly available on the medicallearninghub.com. So once the recording is available, we will send a link so you all can view the recording if you missed out any important talk from the speakers. Thank you so much. So I'm just waiting for the few more minutes to complete the polls by the attendees. So I have almost 81% is completed here. So I'm just waiting for 1 more minute. So
During that 1 minute, yeah. So last but not the least, I would also like to thank Mylan Pharmaceuticals for providing the technical support and your team for this webinar. And we look forward to more such webinars.
Thank you, sir.
We are also receiving questions in chat regarding the certification. So there is no certification participation certification available for this. We are sorry for that. So, but we will be providing you with the recording shortly within a couple of days on your email IDs.
So Mayuri, we have accepted all 100% polls. So I'm ending polls now.
I think we should end the poll then.
So thank you so much, everyone.
Raghav sir, Virendra sir, Agrawal sir. Thank you, participants. Take care.
Bye. Good night. Have a great Sunday to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.